Welcome to the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Monday, July 6th. This is Gina McGuire. Currently, we do not have any significant impacts to fire potential expected across the Great Basin for the next several days, as wet thunderstorms will continue in most areas, and this will still allow for initial attack, but the potential for problem large fires is still low across the Great Basin due to the amount of moisture. Drier air will begin to move into the southern portion of the Great Basin by mid to late week and spread into Nevada, Utah by Saturday. However, this dryness in Utah may be short-lived with moisture quickly returning later in the weekend. Looking at the conditions yesterday across the Great Basin, we had plenty of lightning over parts of the Sierra into western and southern Nevada and around the periphery over southern, eastern, and northern Utah into far northeast Nevada, with drier conditions over southwest Idaho into the central Idaho mountains. The precip image on the right shows the amount of precipitation observed across the Great Basin. If we look at the last 7 days, we have had an above normal amount of rainfall over the Sierra into western and central Nevada and into parts of southern and southeast Utah, with very dry conditions across southern and central Idaho. Looking at the fire activity over the last 24 hours, we have had some small fires emerge across the Great Basin, but right now the risk for large fires becoming problem fires is still relatively low with the amount of moisture in place. Now looking at the water vapor satellite image for Monday morning, high pressure still dominates across the southwest, but is being pushed eastward now as an area of low pressure off the west coast slowly progresses east into the Great Basin. This will allow for cooling temperatures across the Great Basin. However, moisture in place will still allow for wet thunderstorms through this week in many areas, and the thunderstorms will push further north into Idaho as we go towards the middle of the week. Looking at significant fire potential, it will still remain relatively low across Nevada and Utah and into southeast Idaho and Wyoming due to the moisture in place. However, we still do have some drier spots over southwest and the west central Idaho mountains, and as lightning returns by the middle of the week, we may see an uptick in initial attack across parts of Idaho. However, moisture will be quick to follow by mid to late week. Therefore, this will diminish the overall significant threat of large problem fires. Looking at the surface conditions, temperatures will be decreasing, with highs generally in the low to mid-90s across Nevada and Utah, and only reaching the 70s in the higher elevations, with again more widespread showers and thunderstorms in all areas with the exception of parts of the west central Idaho mountains into southwest Idaho today. We have also been seeing flash flooding with the rainfall over parts of western Nevada, and this will continue as we go towards the middle of the week, and wet thunderstorms continue to redevelop over the same areas that have been receiving the flash flooding. Now looking at the conditions from Tuesday through Thursday, again plenty of moisture in place across the Great Basin for those wet thunderstorms to continue, with relatively low fire potential, with again still the drier spot being southwest Idaho and the west central Idaho mountains. Temperatures will continue decreasing this week to near or even below normal across the Great Basin. As we move into Wednesday and that area of low pressure moves over central California, we may see some drier air initially start to move into far southern Nevada, however still wet conditions across the rest of the Great Basin, with continued wet thunderstorms and lower fire potential. Temperatures again will continue declining through the middle of the week, and by Wednesday and Thursday reach 4 to 8 degrees below normal across the Great Basin. Now looking at Thursday through the weekend, the main areas of note will first be the initial return of moisture to parts of Idaho, and this will bring an increase in initial attack with lightning. However, again, moisture will be quick to follow, with generally low fire potential across the Great Basin. As we move into later in the week, we see the drier air start to move into southern Nevada and southern Utah, and this will continue through Saturday with again very dry conditions over southern and eastern Nevada and into Utah. However, moisture quickly returns to Utah, bringing a return of showers and thunderstorms by Sunday, with still continued drying, breezy winds, and low relative humidity across Nevada as we move through this weekend, and this will act to start drying out the fuels from the moisture we've seen recently. Looking at the forecast amount of precipitation on the image on the left for today through Wednesday, again the heaviest amounts of rainfall are expected in the Sierra into western and central Nevada and over parts of western Wyoming. If we look later in the week from Thursday and Friday, we see again the heavier amounts of precipitation in parts of the Sierra, but also moving up into parts of Idaho, bringing rainfall to areas that have been very dry. However, again later in the week you see the drying trend over southern Nevada and southern Utah. ERCs across the area are generally below the 50th percentile, with the exception of southern and parts of the west central Idaho mountains, which is where ERCs are between the 50th and 80th percentile due to the drier weather, but these will be decreasing later this week. Looking at the ERC charts, again showing this upward trend of ERCs, however some areas have flattened out or even started to decrease over parts of Nevada as the moisture has remained in place. Live fuel moisture has also increased in parts of Nevada, even in the juniper and in the sagebrush due to the recent moisture, but is still somewhat low over parts of the Arizona Strip and into the central Idaho mountains. Now looking at the 8 to 14 day outlook by the Climate Prediction Center, taking us into the middle of the month, we'll likely see near and below normal temperatures across the Great Basin and above normal precipitation at least early in the period as we approach mid-month over parts of northern Nevada and Idaho. However, as we approach the 15th through the 20th of July, mainly that very middle section of the month, we'll likely see an increase in moisture in Utah and drier conditions emerge across Nevada. That concludes the briefing for today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us or you can follow us on Twitter. Thank you for listening.